Yeah, so I think, from past experience, right? So if you get all of a sudden a big a scary task or assignment that yeah, so you can you can sort of break it up into a bunch of smaller tasks, or at least understand how to start it. But the uh, yeah, the anxiety that you might get from okay, I have to do this big thing. It might be due quite a while from now. Um, yeah, so I guess the negative feedback loop part was, in the past I would always focus on trying to um, get the strategic important stuff done first. But often, you put a lot of effort into that at the start, and and sometimes you get stuck, but you just have to power through and muscle through, or end up, delaying that or procrastinating, right? As often people do, doing other things and sort of just having that big task sometimes not get done to the level that you're happy with. So I think that, um, and then of course as you're not making progress on that task, it becomes a bigger stress, and then that makes you either, some people will avoid it, some people will do other things, or it just weighs on you, right? And it just creates a negative state of mind from and often you can accomplish the task, but it takes a lot of willpower. So like in the sports analogy, you burn a lot of matches. You only have a certain amount of matches to start your day or your week. But if you end up using all of your mental willpower, just by plowing through and trying to get the task done, you end up feeling pretty mentally tired at the end of it, right? So,
Yeah.
uh, so that's sort of the cycle, I guess, that can kick off. And though you can get things done, it's probably not the most efficient in my experience.
Okay. Now you have so many matches for the day a sports analogy.
Mhm.
What do you mean by
Yes.
sports? How is it a sports
So,
analogy?
so I think there's this concept in, I don't know, cycling or triathlon, probably other sports as well, where uh, the idea is you start your day or your race with a certain number of matches, and when you burn a match, you put in an extra uh, extraordinary effort for a short period of time.
Okay.
But you can only do that so many times in the day before you just run out of energy.
Okay.
So you can burn a match to, catch up to somebody
Yeah.
or pass somebody, but you have to reserve those, throughout the day, because you only have so many. So I think the same thing happens in a mental willpower
Yeah.
perspective. You
Yeah.
start your day with a certain amount of mental willpower,
Yeah.
and you can quickly exhaust it, and then you sort of feel, yeah, like you need to recharge a bit, or yeah, you feel pretty tired mentally, right? So
Yeah. And I think to your point, the other nefarious thing about this willpower that you're describing is that there are multiple different activities that drain on the same resource.
hmm, right.
So if you're like, let's say while you're cycling and you're burning a match to catch up, let's say you've also got a family member in the hospital.
Hmm.
All of these things are pulling on, and you're trying to do your best to stay focused on the race. You've been preparing for years. Your mother's
Yeah,
ill. Maybe you're going through a divorce. Imagine if all of that's happening at the same time.
yeah,
Then you've got maybe one match that day instead of five.
that's
So
right. Yeah,
that's
you
the
got to
other
use it wisely.
you have to use it wisely. And even if you use it, and I think this is the other point, even if you use it super wisely, it's still
Mhm.
a very draining process, and you still walk away feeling like you didn't get a lot done because the analogy that you used when we talked about this is using a match to try to light a log is a
That's right.
is a pretty daunting process. Now, when you first described this, you actually also used the word guilt. And I know it's fairly obvious why you would have
Mhm.
used that word, but can you think of a specific
Right.
time and just expand on it a bit? Why guilt? Because you're still getting your work done.
Um, yeah, I think, if you take the approach to delay, say, the strategic stuff, I think society has or you know told us that, don't be lazy, get the strategic stuff done first, attack the big problem, then you can do the less important or less strategic stuff later. I mean, that's the typical way that you've been taught, right, in school.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the yeah, so when you don't do that, I
Yeah.
think you just inherently feel like, oh, I'm not doing it the most efficient way.
Yeah.
But I think that philosophy, and we can get to it later,
Yeah.
is flawed in the sense that when you bring flow into the equation, that changes the whole perspective of you're doing an amount of work in a period of time. So how much work you can get done in a day, if that's fixed, then yeah, do the strategic ones first. But I think with flow, you change that whole concept of how much work you can do in a day. Therefore, you can take a slightly different approach and end up actually getting more work done. So I think if you can start with, say, some smaller tasks, and
Yeah.
I call it kindling,
Yeah.
and you can get yourself through whatever mechanism you get to into a state of flow, then, and so let's say you can accomplish 3 times as much work in a given day, basically without burning any matches, without any mental willpower. If you can get 3 times as much work done, then it doesn't matter if you start with the most strategic, most important thing first, because you'll get far more done at the end of the day and feel fresh and ready to go the next day.
Yeah.
And so I think this concept of I don't have you almost freeing yourself from this feeling like I don't have to always be focused on the big strategic thing, because that's not actually the most efficient way to get done, at least for me.
Yeah.
And that's the secret that I unlocked over the last couple of years.
Well, and I think so. Again, I think you made a few key points, and we'll kind of circle through them all. Number one, you said without using any willpower. So that's interesting. So now we're talking willpower free workflow. Number two, this kindling concept. So we came across it when we kind of played around with getting things done. And so we'll talk about that in a second in terms of your approach. And then number three, you've been referring to it as the big strategic piece of work today. When we were talking about it before, you called something a great big log. And I think the other point is the whole log isn't strategic. The log's just a great big log. And if you can unlock the strategic part of the log, because the whole log's not strategic. If you can unlock the strategic part of the log and then somehow line it up to be lit by kindling,
right,
then that's a much different description than this big log just showed up and what do I do about it, right?
That's right.
And
so I think there's a couple of pieces to that.
Yeah.
How to break the log down into burnable chunks.
Yeah.
But then getting into a state of flow to get it burnt. I think those are the separate pieces.